but one who is himself, herself, in dialogue with the pupils, because those pupils, while they're being taught, also teach. Teacher and pupils must become jointly responsible for a process in which all grow. Not a new quote, 40 years old, but how relevant. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Bill. It was a wonderful talk, really mesmerizing. And please, any questions? Any questions from the audience?
Well, that was a controversial way to start an assessment conference, I must say. I'd just like to ask the speaker, have you ever been in a classroom you liked? And if so, what did you see there? Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed for being the brave one to start off the questioning. That was one of my good days, so if you thought that was controversial, come and have a chat with me. But a good question. Yes, I have been in classrooms that I like. I was in one 3 years ago. And it was like a workshop. What I like is to see the children really involved. And the word really has no substance to it. But I mean involved in real learning activities in which I can see they have had some part in planning and originating. They can see the purpose for them, and I don't care whether that child is 5 or whether that young person is 25, whether they can see a real purpose for them to be involved in it, because you then get this wonderful integration of the affective, the cognitive, and the conative. In other words, when the affective is so motivated that action takes place, you get this triangle of activity. And it wasn't actually 3 years ago. I have seen some really active classrooms since then. Thank you.
Yes, more questions, please. Just a second, his microphone is coming.
I just want to thank you, Professor Boyle, for saying what needed saying, controversial or not. I frankly don't care if it's controversial, it needed saying. I'm from the UK, although I've now, for various reasons, decided to go and live and work in Singapore, partly because of what happens in the UK. I would like to suggest that what you've said about education and children applies to vocational education and education working with adults just as much. I don't know whether you would agree with that, but we have a situation, it seems to me, where the skills and all the things you've talked about with testocracy have become more important than the performance of the people themselves as individuals and as useful members of society. So it's almost as if this testocracy and vocational education in various forms with competency-type testing has become like a new religious belief where Galileo, like everybody else, determines that the sun actually revolves around it rather than the other way around. So it's an observation, but I would be very happy to hear your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that. I agree with you totally. We have a situation in England where we have a highly developed test examinations culture, but what has it actually produced? On the one hand, we hear people like the CBI, the British industrialists, complaining that they have young people going into industry who can't, and I'm using the media terms here, can't read to a certain standard, can't write to a certain standard. We know all the criticisms that go with that. All I'm using is to point out the analogy that this factory, this sausage factory that we've developed in England isn't producing that. But the contrary is that we don't either have an education system in which young people do become autonomous learners, self-thinkers, free thinkers, because that is squashed out of them. You can be in a secondary school and you can actually hear a conversation between a young person of 16 or 17 with a teacher, and it's a trading, it's a transaction. Just tell me what I need to know, the young person is actually saying, for that response. What do I need to know for that paper? This isn't about learning. This is the recitation script of Robin Alexander, read in tooth and claw. Thank you very much indeed.
Yes, please, microphone 2.
Hello, Professor.
Just a second.
Sorry.
Professor
No.
Boyle? Hello. I appreciate your comments. My question comes down to teacher education. It would seem a lot of the points that you brought up around teaching and learning and focusing on differentiated instruction would come down to improved methodology and improved approaches to teaching. And as one who spent a lot of time at reputable universities from undergraduate to graduate, at no point would I say I had solid instruction in truly how to teach children. And I don't know that that has changed. So when I look at a lot of the points you bring up, of which I agree with all, what I wonder is if we do not adjust the teacher education programs and make sure we have approaches for those that we're teaching, will we truly make the progress that you're discussing?
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. I think to entrap me in a room to talk about teacher training programs in England, you would probably be there for 5 to 6 hours. To save slander and libel, I'm going to talk about my own institution, because it would cost them so much to get rid of me now. It doesn't really matter. We have, I think it's 5 professors in the education faculty, 1 or 2 of them actually international names. None of those 5 go anywhere near PGCE, which is a tale in itself. When I got my chair a few years ago, I set up some meetings with members of PGCE and attempted to start a dialogue about literature, pedagogical styles. It was reduced, because it lasted 1 meeting, and I think 1 person turned up for the second meeting, was reduced to a, well, let's blame the mentors, because it's the mentors to blame, and the students spend their time setting up the mentors to argue against the academics. So I then invited Hilary Emery, who I know quite well from her days when she used to work for a government quango, but she's now head of, I think it's some sort of executive at the Teacher Development Agency in England, along to have a conversation with some international visitors of mine. She very kindly came. I'm not talking out of turn here, because obviously I reciprocate with conversations and sound bites for her. She talked about the 33 block points, or whatever it is, in the TDA mantra. She'd left the room. The first thing my international guests said, well, is that all it is? That they go through this tick box mentality? And I'm afraid that is all it is. I mean, there needs to be a huge upsurge in involvement in the teacher training model. It's part of this closed fist that our governments, and I'm using the plural, because let's be apolitical about this. We had a socialist government under Tony Blair that was actually more right-wing than Thatcher's right-wing government as regards its education policy. So somewhere, that for the next generation to have a future, as I was shouting at you before, we need to start, and a number of us did sign various petitions to the Guardian and the Independent went at the time of the next election to say keep your hands off education. But since education became a wonderful soundbite in 1997, governments have seen it as a great way to say, wasn't my intervention successful? And unless we get the mavericks fighting and we get some of the academics that are so busy, you know, writing mindless papers for peer-reviewed journals, to actually get up on the street and do something about it, then yeah, I agree with you totally.
Hello, my name's Carolyn Adams from the International Baccalaureate. I'd like to ask a follow-up question from the first question that was asked about whether you had ever seen a lesson that you'd liked. Have you ever seen an assessment that you've liked, particularly one that's large-scale national or international assessment that you admire and support? Thank you.
I really like the one that was designed in 1988. That the items were developed by teachers, they were trialled nationally, they were based around the curriculum of the year group that was being assessed. The teachers were empowered to use those assessments when they saw fit. The assessments had two phases: a confirmatory phase for where the teacher entered the child, and an exploratory phase for the teacher to explore where the young person was. So that's, you've asked me specifically about national assessment. That was a national assessment model. Apart from that, in national assessment terms, no. I just don't think it's possible. There are too many contextual variables for there to ever be a valid and reliable whole cohort national test. Sampling is a different matter. Classroom assessment is a different matter. I hope that semi-answers your question. The long version would be a rather nice seminar, which I'm always pleased. I'm here for 4 days, I gather, anyway, so we can have a conversation.
My name is Godswill from Nigeria. Mr. Boyle, I think I agree with you. I share your views on humanisticism. That is to say, bring up individuals that are not only cognitive, but also tend to make the world a more peaceful place. And that also brings pressure on assessment instruments on affective domain. As the world congeals into a global globe, the truth cannot become even more emphatic. I think we have a little problem, and as we bring up challenges to assessment. When we bring up individuals that make bombs and compete in contradiction to acquiring nuclear energy, it also brings to bear that the aspects of humanisticism couldn't have been more bare than now. I think my challenge is, how do we begin to re-emphasize the affective component of assessment? How do we begin to integrate them to making judgments in the classroom? How do we begin to make certification, not just on the cognitive variables or factors, but how do we begin to integrate? Those of us in assessment have always emphasized that we need to be more effective, we need to bring up the affective components, not just psychoproductive. But how do we do this? How do we make them reliable in the classroom environment? How do we bring up the teacher capacity? Those that will also bring to bear that when we give certification at various levels, be it primary or tertiary or whatever, that those individuals will bring up will not wipe out future generation. I think this is a basic challenge. How do we begin to make the affects, how do we begin to make them bear upon humanisticism, to bring up individuals, not just at individual level, but also at institutional levels, at global levels, to begin to make people see the world a place that will become more humanistic than we have now. I think, Mr. Ball, we need to clear that issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I think you were asking me about the affective domain within assessment. So that's going to be the tenor of my response. If I have misheard, then I do apologize. So my response would be that within the redefining of assessment, to me, always the primary definition of assessment, within which it is integrated with teaching and learning, you naturally, if you understand teaching and learning, are incorporating the affective domain. The problem with the testocracy is that it focuses 100% on cognition. Now, if you are teaching, you have to have the tripartite affective domain, conative domain, and the cognitive domain, and then it works well. The affective domain enables the conative domain within the child to come to the forth. So you do have what I think you were asking me, that the children start, young people, adolescents, start to demonstrate what they are capable of achieving in circumstances, i.e. rich environments, rich learning environments, which is what a school should be striving for the next generation, because we haven't had it for the current generation. We've had sterility in classrooms. You have this pre-planned 3-part lesson written out. Now that's not an affective domain environment in which a young person is going to learn.
Well, one more question, please, and we're going to close the session.
Good morning, Professor. I've got 2 questions to ask you. The first is, I actually operate in the world of tertiary and vocational education because I gave up the secondary school system and education out of fury and frustration. And I think we're doing it a bit better, certainly in New Zealand, in the area there. But I also have a 7-year-old granddaughter, and I'm watching her in the education system at the moment. I was interested that Carol mentioned IB, because the school that she goes to has brought in IB into the lower levels of the school. And they're absolutely fascinated and, if not to say, almost obsessed with the notion of inquiry-based learning, to the exclusion, in my opinion, of everything else. And having had my granddaughter stay with me for 3 weeks and been very involved in her homework, where I did the teaching because none of the learning had happened at school, I was a wee bit concerned about that. But I'd rather have that than the scourge that's actually operating in the New Zealand environment, which is called national standards. And we have a new curriculum in this country, in our country, which in effect would do a lot of what you're talking about. But a political agenda has brought in this whole range of national standards under which large percentages of children will be told that they're failures because they haven't met these national standards, which in my opinion have been very poorly designed. So my first question is inquiry-based learning. My second is, could you come to New Zealand, please, and say very loudly and emphatically, and if not rudely, what you've just said here, because I think it would be a very useful thing to have happen in our country at this moment.
Well, I'll check the diary. Thank you. Your first point, I'm delighted that you've been reintroduced to inquiry-based learning. And surely part of the extension, the natural extension of that inquiry-based learning is that you and your 7-year-old will have had some really good learning conversations, which your 7-year-old will have been able to feed back to her teacher as to how it should be a two-way learning inquiry situation. So I'm being deliberately light-hearted, because the second part of your question, which was very serious, and not that the inquiry-based one wasn't serious, obviously, but the whole issue of national standards, I can't believe that hollow farce has run as long as it has. I look round this room here and I see, and there must be at least 50 people in the room, and all of you 50 have put aside 4 or 5 days of your lives to apply your thinking to a major education issue, the linking of assessment to teaching and learning. And yet we allow our politicians, the majority of whom depend on us to occupy the situations that they're in, to impose farces like national standards. It's an impossibility. You can't have national standards, just as you can't have international testing. So I'll certainly come over and I'll talk and browbeat to whoever you want me to. More than happy. Thank you very much indeed. I've enjoyed the session this morning. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Could I please invite Dr. Pornpan Waithayangun on the stage to present Professor Boyle and Dr. Salman the tokens of appreciation. Dr. Pornpan, please.